There's something I need to say, and I hope this time it truly reaches you. Maybe no one's told you this clearly before, but you need to hear it now. You are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not behind. You are carrying pain that was never supposed to be yours. Somewhere along the way, you were taught to survive, just survive. Not to feel safe, not to grow with confidence, not to live fully, but simply to keep going no matter how much it hurts. So now, when life expects you to be strong, consistent, fearless, there's a part of you that pulls back. Not because you don't want a better life, but because some part of you still feels unsafe. Some part of you learned early on that staying quiet, staying small, or staying hidden was the safest choice. It wasn't your fault. It was how you protected yourself. Think back to when you were a little child, before all the layers, before you started adjusting to fit what others wanted. Back then, you didn't hold back. You cried when you were hurt. You reached for love without feeling ashamed. You laughed when you felt joy. You weren't pretending. You were just you, open, soft, honest, and unafraid to show your feelings. That child, the real you, is still inside. You didn't lose them. They didn't disappear. They've just been buried under years of coping and surviving. This is what people mean when they talk about your inner child. It's not just a memory, it's a living part of who you are. It holds all your first moments of happiness, but also your first moments of fear, rejection. The famous psychologist Carl Jung once said, "The child represents potential, not just the past, but also who you can become." If you're willing to look back and reconnect with the younger version of you, the one who got hurt, who got scared, who had to grow up too fast, you'll find the key to healing. That child is still waiting to be seen, heard, and loved. When you were young, your brain and body were still learning how the world worked. You picked up not just words, but feelings. How people looked at you, how they treated you, whether they smiled when you walked in the room, whether they comforted you when you cried. Those early experiences shaped what you believe about love, safety, and worth. And now, as an adult, when something painful happens, when someone ignores you, criticizes you, or leaves you, it's often not your adult self that reacts first. It's the child in you, the one who once felt invisible. That pain doesn't come out of nowhere. It's coming from the part of you that still hasn't healed. Have you ever noticed how certain things affect you more than they should? Like when someone doesn't reply to your message, and you suddenly feel anxious or unwanted. Or when someone raises their voice and you completely shut down. Or when you receive criticism, even small, and it leaves you feeling worthless for the rest of the day. It's not because you're weak. It's because something inside you remembers. Your body is reacting based on what it learned long ago. Back when your voice wasn't heard, back when love felt uncertain, back when being too much or not enough seemed to be the reason people left or got angry. These responses are not about now. They come from back then. That part of you, the inner child, still lives inside. And many of the behaviors you have today were built to protect them. If you became a high achiever, maybe it's because you learned that being loved meant being perfect. If you always try to keep the peace, maybe it's because conflict once meant fear. If you tend to keep people at a distance, maybe it's because closeness used to hurt. You did what you had to do to feel safe. And those choices weren't wrong. In fact, they were smart at the time. But you're not that child anymore. You've grown. You're stronger now. And that means you can begin to go back, not to relive the pain, but to heal it. You now have the power to give that younger version of yourself what they never got: love, safety, and understanding. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." What he meant is that real change doesn't come from chasing the world's approval. It comes from paying attention to your inner world, your fears, your memories, your truth. That's where your healing begins. The fears you carry today: fear of rejection, fear of being alone, fear of not being good enough. Those aren't flaws. They're echoes. Echoes of moments when your needs were ignored or your heart was hurt. They stay with you until someone shows up to say, "You didn't deserve that. That wasn't your fault." And the person who needs to say that is you. Many of us don't even realize we're still reacting to old wounds. We walk through life believing this is just how I am. But so much of what we call personality is actually protection. We say, "I just don't trust people." But what we really mean is, "I was let down too many times when I needed someone." We say, "I like being independent," when deep down, we mean depending on others used to lead to pain. We say, "I don't like conflict," when what we really mean is, "I once got hurt for speaking up." These patterns don't come from nowhere. They were shaped by experiences. Some big, some small, where you felt unseen, unheard, or unloved. And even if no one yelled or hit you, the silence can still leave a scar. Maybe you cried and no one came. Maybe no one ever asked how you felt. Maybe you were physically safe, but emotionally alone. And your younger self had to make sense of that emptiness. That child inside you may have decided, "My needs don't matter," or "If I'm too much, they'll leave," or "I have to earn love by being perfect." And once those beliefs take root, they run deep. They shape how you show up in relationships, in work, even in how you talk to yourself. You become the adult who says sorry too often. The adult who pushes good people away because love doesn't feel safe. The adult who stays quiet in rooms where they should speak. Or the adult who's always smiling on the outside but secretly breaking inside. And you don't even know why. You just feel tired, lost, like something's been off for a long time. Here's the truth. These patterns didn't start with you. Most were passed down, sometimes without words. Maybe your parents didn't know how to show love, because no one showed them either. Maybe they had wounds they never healed. And so, without even meaning to, they handed those wounds to you. You learned to adapt, to be what others needed, even if it meant abandoning yourself. Carl Jung believed that healing isn't about blaming those who hurt us. It's about understanding how their pain was passed down and choosing to break the cycle. He once said, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." That means the anxiety, the overthinking, the numbness, all of it are signs of deeper pain. Pain that was never given the care it deserved. Beneath the surface of your struggles, there's something many people miss. Grief. Not the kind that comes from a single event, but the kind that slowly builds over time. The grief of not being truly seen. The grief of not being comforted when you were hurting. The grief of having to grow up too soon, pretending to be okay before you even understood what okay meant. This kind of grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hides behind perfectionism, behind always being the strong one, behind the voice in your head that says, "You're fine, just keep going." But deep down, something in you knows you were never meant to carry so much alone. The child within you doesn't want you to simply move on. That part of you wants acknowledgement. They want someone to finally say, "You shouldn't have been treated that way. You didn't imagine it. You didn't ask for too much." That younger version of you wants to be believed. And if you've ever felt like you're too emotional or too sensitive, maybe it's because you were never given the space to just be human. Maybe you're not too much. Maybe you were just too alone with emotions, too big for a child to handle. Your feelings weren't the problem. The lack of support. You've been responding to pain in the only ways you knew how. Your nervous system built defenses, ways to cope, ways to survive. And those defenses helped you then. But now you're ready for something more. You're not here to just survive anymore. You're here to heal, to feel safe, and to live fully. Healing your inner child means you stop blaming yourself for what was missing It means you stop thinking that your emotional needs were a weakness. They weren't. They were human. And now you get to give yourself what you didn't receive back then: understanding, compassion, and care. Healing your inner child is not just about facing the pain, it's also about uncovering the joy that's been buried underneath it. Because once you begin to release the shame, the guilt, and the pressure that never belonged to you, something incredible starts to happen. You begin to feel again, not just the sadness, but also the wonder, the softness, the hope that's been waiting quietly beneath the surface. You start to realize that your wounds are not the end of your story. They're actually the beginning of a new one. One where you're no longer stuck in old patterns, but writing new chapters, where you're not just reacting from pain, but responding from a place of self-awareness, strength, and care. This doesn't mean the journey is easy. There will be days when the old voices come back, voices that say you're not enough, that you should be doing more, that it's selfish to rest. But now, you have the ability to recognize them for what they are: echoes from the past. You don't have to obey them anymore. Instead, you can begin to speak to yourself in a new way. You can say things like, "It's okay to rest," or "I did my best today," or "My needs matter too." These small, gentle phrases are powerful. They begin to rewrite the way you relate to yourself. They begin to create safety where there once was only fear. The real power in healing isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of who you really are, underneath the pain. The joyful, creative, honest self that existed before the world taught you to hide. That version of you still exists. They just need you to return to them with kindness. And you don't have to rush. You don't have to do it perfectly. Healing isn't about checking boxes or fixing yourself. It's about being willing to show up, to look at the parts of yourself that were once ignored and say, "I'm here now. I see you. I'm not leaving." That's when things begin to shift. That's when you start to feel whole. Sometimes we think we've moved on, like the past is behind us and we've outgrown it. But healing doesn't work that way. The truth is, the parts of you that were hurt don't just disappear. They stay with you, not to punish you, but because they're still waiting to be heard. Have you ever had moments where something small triggered a big reaction? Maybe someone forgot to call, and it left you feeling rejected for days. Maybe someone gave you a strange look, and you suddenly felt like you did something wrong. Maybe you were praised, but couldn't believe it. These aren't random reactions. They're old stories trying to be seen. Your body holds memory. Memory from times when your feelings were dismissed, when your tears were called dramatic, or when love felt like something you had to earn. The child in you still remembers how it felt to not be chosen, to be misunderstood, to be invisible, and that memory can rise up even when everything around you seems fine. The inner child doesn't scream loudly. Often, they whisper. They show up in your people-pleasing, your perfectionism, your fear of rest. They show up in your deep need for approval and your anxiety when things are going well, as if happiness can't be trusted. They show up in the way you sometimes shrink, apologize, or stay quiet when your truth wants to be spoken. You may think this is just your personality, but in many cases, it's not. It's a survival strategy, a quiet defense mechanism created by a child who did the best they could to feel safe in an unsafe world. And even now, those patterns try to protect you by keeping you hidden, by keeping you small, by keeping you guarded. But you don't have to live like that anymore. You can learn to listen to the whispers. You can recognize them not as flaws but as signals. Each one is a message from your younger self saying, "Please notice me. I'm still here. I still matter." And when you start to listen, something beautiful begins to happen. You begin to return home to yourself. You might be the one everyone depends on, the strong one, the calm one, the one who always shows up, no matter how you feel inside. And while people admire your strength, they rarely see the cost of it. They don't know about the nights you lie awake with a heaviness in your chest you can't explain. They don't know how much energy it takes to keep holding it all together. That silent strength often begins in childhood. When no one else could carry the weight, you did. When no one listened, you stopped asking. When love came with conditions, you learned to perform. You became self-sufficient, emotionally careful, always aware of what others needed. But who was there for you? The child in you still remembers what it felt like to be left alone with big emotions, to be told you were too much or not enough. And now, even as an adult, that pain can quietly shape how you see yourself. Maybe you flinch at raised voices. Maybe you struggle to rest without feeling guilty. Maybe you crave love, but feel unworthy of receiving it fully. These aren't weaknesses. They are reminders that a part of you is still waiting to feel safe. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And he was right. It takes courage to face the parts of yourself that have been ignored, denied, or misunderstood for so long. But you're not that child anymore. You have power now. You can look back with compassion instead of shame. You can stop apologizing for your sensitivity. You can stop pushing your needs aside just to be accepted. You can say, "What happened to me matters, and I'm allowed to feel it," because the moment you stop judging yourself for what you carry and begin honoring it instead, is the moment healing begins to grow roots. Real healing isn't loud, it's slow, it's steady, it's choosing every day to come closer to yourself, even when it's hard. Somewhere along the way, you might have learned that being loved meant being impressive, that if you were helpful enough, quiet enough, smart enough, beautiful enough, then you'd be worthy. So you worked hard to become everything others seemed to want. You became strong, capable, kind, and reliable. But somewhere in all of that, you lost sight of who you really were underneath it all. The inner child inside of you never wanted perfection. They just wanted to feel safe, to be accepted as they were. Not for what they could do, not for how well they behaved, but simply for existing. And if that need was never met, you may still feel like you have to earn your worth every single day, even now. But the truth is, you don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to chase validation from people who never learned how to see your light. You don't have to bend yourself into shapes that leave you aching and exhausted. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be loved without proving anything. And maybe no one ever told you that before. Maybe you've lived your whole life waiting for someone else to say it. But healing means becoming that someone. For yourself. Becoming the voice that says, "You don't have to be perfect. You're already enough. You're already worthy." This is how the story begins to change. When you stop abandoning yourself just to belong. When you stop chasing people who can't meet you where you are. When you finally start listening to the part of you that has been quietly whispering, "Please stay. Please choose me." Every time you offer yourself patience instead of punishment, comfort instead of criticism, you are building something sacred. You are creating the kind of love that lasts, the kind that your inner child has always needed. And the more you do, the more you realize you are never too broken to be whole. There comes a moment in healing when you stop waiting for the love you didn't receive and start learning how to give it to yourself. That's what it means to reparent your inner child. It's not about pretending the pain didn't happen. It's about recognizing how it shaped you and choosing to respond differently now. Reparenting starts in small, everyday choices. When you make a mistake, do you speak to yourself with kindness or do you attack yourself the way others once did? When you feel overwhelmed, do you push through until you break or do you pause and ask, "What do I need right now?" When you're hurting, do you brush it off or do you finally say, "Of course this hurts"? Anyone would feel this way. Most of us learn to speak to ourselves using the voice of those who wounded us. That critical voice that says, "You're too much," or "You're not enough," didn't come from nowhere. It was passed down. But the moment you become aware of it, you gain the power to replace it with a voice that is gentle, loving, and true. Carl Jung once asked, "What did you love as a child that made the hours pass like minutes?" That question isn't just about fun. It's about healing, because healing the inner child isn't only about facing the sadness. It's also about rediscovering the joy that's been waiting. The curiosity, the laughter that came without shame. Maybe it shows up in art, in nature, in music, in movement. Maybe it's simply giving yourself permission to play again, to be silly, to rest, to do something just because it feels good, not because it's productive. These small moments are not silly, they're sacred. They tell your inner child, "You're safe with me now." And yes, there will be days when the old pain resurfaces. There will be moments when the past feels close again. But now you have tools. You have awareness. And most importantly, you have choice. You get to show up for yourself again and again. Not perfectly, but faithfully. You don't have to erase your past to heal. You don't have to forget what happened or pretend it didn't hurt. What you can do, what you are doing, is breaking the cycle. You are choosing to stop the pattern of neglect, of silence, of shame. And that alone is powerful. You can't go back and rewrite what happened to you as a child. But you can stop repeating it every time you ignore your needs, silence your voice, or push through pain without asking why it's there. That's how healing works. It's not about control. It's about choice, about seeing clearly and responding differently. You can choose not to abandon yourself when things get hard. You can choose to stay when everything in you wants to run. You can choose to stop chasing people who never saw your value, and instead show up for the one person who always needed your love the most. The more you listen, the more you soften. The more you soften, the more you begin to trust yourself again. And as you learn to trust yourself, you begin to feel a quiet kind of safety you may have never felt before. A sense that you no longer have to earn your place in the world. You simply belong. And no, healing isn't a straight path. There will be hard days. But even then, you'll notice something's different. You'll respond with more patience. You'll pause before falling into old patterns. You'll remember that growth is not about perfection. It's about presence. Because every time you choose to show up for yourself with gentleness, you are doing something radical. You are becoming the kind of support you always needed. Not just for the child you were, but for the adult you are now. That is how you build a life that feels like home. There is something beautiful and a little mysterious about what happens when you finally turn toward the parts of yourself you once tried to avoid. The fear, the sadness, the confusion. They begin to lose their grip when they are no longer ignored. The inner child in you, the one who has been waiting in silence, begins to feel seen. And that's the turning point. When you stop running from your pain and start listening to it. When you stop blaming yourself for what others couldn't give. When you stop pretending that everything is fine and instead say, "It's okay if it's not." That's when you begin to come home. Not just to your body, but to your truth. Carl Jung once said, "In each of us, there is another we do not know. That other is the deeper part of you, the part that never forgot what really mattered, the part that knows your worth, even when you doubt it, the part that remembers how to feel deeply, to laugh freely, to love fully." This deeper self sees the child inside you, not as broken, but as brave, not as weak, but as wise. Every time you've cried and got back up, every time you loved even after being hurt, every time you forgave, even without an apology, that was your inner child's strength shining through. And when you accept them, when you give them space to breathe, you don't just heal the past. You open the future. Life starts to feel less like a constant battle and more like a quiet return, a journey back to the self you were always meant to be, before the world told you who you had to become. You are not a problem to fix. You are a story unfolding. And the more you make space for that child inside you, the more you welcome them without judgment, the more you realize everything you needed back then is something you can begin to give yourself now. One choice, one word, one breath at a time. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive, too dramatic, or too much. You are a person who has been carrying the weight of unspoken pain and unmet needs for far too long. And still, you've kept going. You've done your best. But now, you're ready to do more than survive. You're ready to come home. You don't have to chase love anymore. You don't have to prove your worth by performing or pleasing or perfecting. You don't have to carry the old shame that was handed to you by people who didn't know how to love themselves, let alone you. That was their pain, not your identity. Right here, right now, you can make a new promise to yourself. I will stay. I will listen. I will choose me. Not out of selfishness, but out of sacred responsibility. Because no one else can do this part for you. The healing begins with your choice to return to the child within and say, I'm here now. I see you. I won't leave you again. Carl Jung believed that true healing comes when we integrate all parts of ourselves. The wounded, the wise, the quiet, the wild. And that's what you're doing now. You are not erasing who you were. You are including them in your future. You are turning your pain into power, your confusion into clarity, your survival into softness. And even though it may not always feel easy, it will feel real, because the moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment your life begins to feel like yours again. Not someone else's version, not a performance, but a home, a sanctuary, a life led from within. So take a deep breath. You've already come so far. And maybe, for the first time, you're finally ready to listen to the voice that's been whispering all along. Not the voice of fear, but of truth. The voice that says, you are loved. You are worthy. You are enough. And you are finally home.